But I say that my breakdown wasn't a spontaneous combustion precipitated by a single event, but a lifetime of smoldering embers that finally caught fire and incinerated everything in their path.
I love that.
Do you know anything about business news? And I was like, I hated business news. I didn't know shit about business news. And I was like, abso-fucking-lutely. I love business news. I love it all day, every day. And I lied. I totally lied. And I said, balance and chaos have to coexist. They must. And so I looked at it as the superpower, and I realized, though, that there is no external solution to an internal problem.
This episode is brought to you by Nail It and Scale It, the world's leading fast growth program for businesses. If you have ever wanted to grow your business faster than what you can right now, if you need to make more revenue, if you need more leads, if you need more clients, if you need to know how to plan your business in a strategic way in order to hit big goals, if you need to learn how to scale your business and grow your team and your business so that you have more freedom, then this program is for you. Imagine 3 days immersed with me where we cover all aspects of business, but we do it from an immersive but also an execution standpoint. We execute every step of the way. And we're looking at 5 key areas. We're looking at your psychology. We're looking at your marketing, your sales, your leadership, and we're looking at your planning and how we integrate these 5 key areas to grow your business and your brand quickly. So if you'd like to find out more information, kerwinray.com. So ladies and gentlemen, it's my absolute honor. Our last day here in New York City, downtown here in Soho, we have Nicole Lapin. So nice to have you here.
Save the best for last, baby.
Best for last, indeed. It's so good to have you here.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Like New York Times best-selling author, you've written a library from what I can tell from what we've got here. How many books have you written?
Mini library.
Many libraries?
Well, the jury's out on this one. So I had Rich Bitch, Boss Bitch, Becoming Superwoman, and then I just launched the Superwoman Journal that goes along with Becoming Superwoman. So I can't tell if that's like 3.5. Does the journal count as a full one? Is it 4?
Oh, I've got 2 titles for you though.
Think? Yeah.
Nice Bitch. Yeah.
I like
and
it.
Zen Bitch.
Zen Bitch.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
All the bitches.
All the bitches. Like you can have a culmination. You sell them all together.
Aussie Bitch. It's coming out.
It's so great to have you here. And as I said, like I've just, in my research where I learned so much about you, I know nothing about you, which is great, and which is going to make this interview even more interesting. But even just from our conversation right now, I can see you've got chops, you've got massive personality. Do you have that?
I'm lacking so much. Personality is not one of them.
Well, no, but do you have that saying over here? You've got chops?
Chops?
Chops.
Like meat chops?
No, well, in Australia we say if you've got chops, you know how to talk. Like you're a good communicator.
Oh.
Yeah.
I think
so it's like we say stop flapping your chops for no reason. Like.
Oh, I like that one. Flapping chops. That's a really interesting visual.
People are sitting there right now thinking about flapping like pork chops in the air, but no, or lamb chops.
I'm here for it.
Thank you. Vegans unite. We're going to do a vegan TikTok challenge. So I'm super curious. Like as I was scanning your profile on Instagram last night, and not
while you were on a date.
While I was on a date, thank you very much for throwing me in that one. The audience will love that. I was actually super fascinated. Like the more I scroll, I was like, okay. First of all, I was like, okay, another author. But then I was like, wow, okay, you've actually got a bit of a story. Like you've got a bit of a history. You've got a bit of an origin. And so the more I scrolled, the more interested I became. And that's when I stopped.
And then you stopped the date.
Literally.
And she was like, what the fuck?
Well, I wanted to see if I could get curious about you. And the moment I got curious about you, I was like, yeah, I want to know more. I stopped looking. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to save it for the conversation. And so you live in New York City. You have for how long?
I live at the airport, I feel like.
Oh,
more
right.
So.
Yeah. Okay. Like at the Holiday Inn? Like...
I feel like I live at the Delta Terminal, the Delta Lounge.
Yeah,
I'm always like, oh, you guys got new art. And they're like, you need a life. Like, go home. Do you have a home?
What's that movie with Tom Hanks where he lives in the airport?
I feel like that.
Yeah, okay.
I feel like the lady version of that.
Yeah, wow.
But I've lived in 15 cities in the
Holy
last...
smokes.
20 or so years, yeah. Building a broadcast career, you go to like small markets, and in theory you mess up there, I mess up everywhere, and then you work your way up to network and all of that. And so I came to New York about 10 years ago when I started at CNBC.
Okay.
Yeah.
But what I'm curious to know is where did it all begin? Like where were you born? And
we're going to the womb.
We're going to the womb, baby. Let's go.
Okay.
Let's be womb mates for a little bit.
Sweet.
Okay.
I grew up in an immigrant family, first
kidding.
generation American. Yeah.
Where are you from? What's your ethnicity?
Israel. Both of my parents immigrated. They both grew up on a kibbutz, which is like an orphanage in Israel.
Oh my God.
And yeah, I never read the Wall Street Journal or anything growing up, which is...
You were born here, though.
Which is cuckoo that I am a money expert.
Yeah.
Fast forward. I was born in LA.
Okay.
Yeah.
Whereabouts in LA?
So originally in Orange County, but not the fancy part, not where you have like cappuccinos at school. And then LA proper, and then I went to school in Chicago at Northwestern.
Wow, that's quite a bit of a flip. Like, how old were you when you moved to Chicago?
I was really young, so I skipped a bunch of grades and...
Because you were just too smart?
I was just wicked smart.
Yeah.
And I started college really early, and I went to college and high
You're
school.
like a Doogie Howser or something?
Some like small newspapers did call me that, actually.
Really?
Yeah, but hopefully a little bit cuter than that.
Very cute Doogie Howser. Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, I kind of was like I don't know, a child star where I kind of grew up on the air. So I started on the air actually at 15.
Really?
Yeah.
So that makes me curious. Like, you started on the air at 15. What was that? Was that a job, or was that just you were...
It was local...
Standing beside the weatherman?
Oh my God. It was like local cable access, really small, Channel 6. And I went in because in high school I wasn't good at much. I mean, I'm not good at much right now. But I was trying to find my way, like a lot of, adolescents, trying to figure out where they belong and what they're good at.
And this is in Chicago?
This is in LA.
Oh, this is in LA?
Yeah.
Right,
and
okay.
so then I went to this little broadcasting station and I was like, okay, maybe I'll try to be the interviewer for the movie reviews. And so I prepared this little movie review and I went and I auditioned and I saw the list come out and I didn't get the movie reviewer thing and I was really pissed. And I was like, God, I'm never gonna get good at anything. I'm never gonna make something out of my life because I grew up in a super broken home. Like, that's a whole other podcast. Okay. Where I just wanted to start working and I wanted to hide from like a super traumatic, crazy upbringing. And I left the list and then people were like, wait, you're the main anchor. You got the main anchor job. And I'm like, what? Like, I got the main job? I didn't even want that job. Everybody had to just audition for that as well. And so I was like, oh, it was like 15.
You got anchor at 15?
Yeah.
Was this a regional, country?
It was super local access.
Okay,
Yeah. It was like...
Not to play it down, but I'm like, that's amazing.
Please play it down. Oh, no. It was like 4 people were watching.
Wow.
But, I was like, oh, I could be good at this. And then I just continued on and I rose the ranks really, really quickly.
So at what point did you know you wanted
to be... With the chops. I
with
flapped the chops
you
all
those
across
chops,
the country.
baby. Pork chops everywhere. So at what point did you know that you wanted to be in front of the camera?
It was then. It was like sort of by
accident. So you had not even thought about being in journalism, not even thought about being a presenter,
No,
TV?
And what's crazy is if you really want to get deep, I had a lot of trauma from news growing up. My family was on the news in a bad way and I was never allowed to watch it.
Wow.
So sometimes you're drawn to the things that hurt you most.
Wow.
And so I would, be scared of reporters growing up. And then I got into the thing that, I felt so negatively toward. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to make this different. And I'm going to be here to write the first draft of history. And I had all these big grandiose philosophies around it.
So was there any part of your conscious that was aware at the age of 15 that you were actually conquering a massive trauma?
Totally not.
Totally
not. I didn't know what trauma was until a few years ago. I didn't even know that was
a
legit word.
3 therapists. I don't know.
Totally. Definitely not at the time. I didn't, when you grow up in such a fucked up environment, my father was a drug addict and an alcoholic and died of an overdose ultimately when I was 11.
Wow.
I didn't know that was weird. There was never a week that went by that police weren't at my house and prostitutes and drugs and guns and craziness. And and social workers, I didn't know that was weird. And until you realize that it's not what happens to everybody.
Where's mum in all of this?
She pieced out and she actually, was a whole other. This is a whole other podcast. Yeah, I'm totally derailing. I feel like I'm taking the chops over.
No, not at all. I'm interested in you. This is you. Part of your story is, part of your grit. And again, the reason I kind of go here is because oftentimes people will see, the stunningly beautiful woman who's got the incredible broadcasting career.
Wait, where? Thank you.
Pointing to Matthias. But they don't relate to that. So oftentimes what people will relate to is, oh yeah, my dad was a drug addict. Oh yeah, my parents broke up. Like for me, that's why I want to find out more about you. Like what makes you real. Yeah, if that's okay.
I got so much realness. I got realness for days.
Spread it like peanut butter.
Failure wasn't an option for me. I didn't have like a couch to go back and crash at. My parents divorced when I was 3. They went through this crazy trial, and my mother kidnapped me, changed my name. Like I got into a whole Lifetime movie. Like I had a whole lifetime of trauma that I didn't even know. And what happened was that I worked some more, and I self-prescribed for myself, not drugs or alcohol, but work to hide from this.
Interviews. Yeah. So you became a workaholic.
I did.
Okay.
And my goal in life was to be an anchor on CNN after, I fell into this profession. Yeah. And I got there when I was 21, which is like super high class problems because that's your goal in life.
But I also see the challenge with that, getting such a big goal at such an early age. Because I know for myself, like when I hit one of my first big goals at the age of 27, literally for 2 weeks, I was like, ooh. And then like on the 15th day, I was like,
Right, I have to keep raising the bar. Right.
Well, it wasn't even so much I have to keep working. I was like, but was that it? Like I thought I've arrived now. I thought all this feeling was going to go now. It's like, fuck, I still feel just as insecure. I feel just as... It was like...
Imposter syndrome is still
was that
here.
A similar situation for you?
1,000%. I never thought that my badge was going to work at CNN when I went into the building.
It's just wow, man, the fake IDs these days.
I was like, they're going to figure me out. They're going to find out. They're going to find out how old I am. Yeah. My badge is magically going to stop working. It's going to totally make sense. Wow. And I went recently to go do a segment for my latest book at CNN, and I took a picture right by the security desk and right by the place where you scan your badge. And I'm like, I was so freaked out that this wasn't going to work. And today I finally am like, no, it's going to work. I belong here. This is what I'm supposed to be. Yeah.
I'm a visitor today. This is real.
Yeah.
So at what age did you leave LA? You did the local community at 15. You then went to Chicago.
I went to Chicago.
How old?
And
best guess.
Yeah, I was
I'm like
16.
you. You're like, okay.
Yeah, I was young.
Okay.
And I...
Is this when your mum like took you cross country?
No,
okay.
That was a whole other...
All
that
right.
was like super young.
Okay.
But I wanted to get far away, and...
So you moved yourself to Chicago?
Yeah.
Solo?
Yeah, I bought socks for the first time.
Good for you.
I mean it.
What about underwear? Did you leave that one out? You gotta be like, no.
I mean, it was the first time that I saw cold.
Yeah.
It's never too cold in LA to wear flip-flops.
I've only heard stories about Chicago, like the Windy City. Yeah.
Jandals?
Pardon? Jandals?
Is that?
That's not really an Australian thing.
Is that not? What is it?
Sandals. We wear sandals or thongs, but you guys call it thongs. Yeah, that's it, yeah. I know, right? I was just wearing my thongs down to the shop, and I was like, "You wore your thong to the shop?" I was like, "Yeah, like every day." I was like, "Did people look at you?" I was like, "No, everybody wears thongs." Like, in public? It's like, yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah. So yeah, I wore thongs a lot growing up.
Right.
Yeah, and then I locked it up when it got cold out.
Yeah, right. So you were quite a hippie child, were you? Like kind of free and barefoot and no?
No, I was like a super serious kid. Okay. I was like valedictorian of my high school and college. I know. And like I say
smart.
that, but that and 350 will get me a soy latte across the street. Like nobody actually cares at this point as a grown ass adult. But yeah, I just studied and I like hid in work. And then while I was in college.
This is in Chicago, right?
Yeah, while I was in college,
so
I
you
worked
got into Chicago
studied.
over there. Oh, sorry, you got into college in Chicago.
Yeah.
And what age were you when you got into college? Is this
I was
legal?
super young. Yeah. I mean, there was a lot of places that I worked in local news, like Lexington, Kentucky, Sioux Falls, South Dakota. I don't know if I violated child labor laws or something like that, but like I paid my dues in these small markets. And then I just, got tape really quickly and just kept submitting my tape to bigger and bigger markets. And when I was still at school, I think I was about 18, I went into this small broadcasting station in Chicago, and I thought at that point I'm ready for big market Milwaukee at the time, because the media markets go from about 200, which is the smallest, to 1, which is New York.
Right.
And Milwaukee, I think, was like 30s or 40s, and I was like, I'm ready for this big time.
For the big time.
Yeah, and they were like, I was like, oh, I'll take the train, I'll do anything. And I go in and they say, well, first of all, you don't know anything about geography. You can't take the train every day. And second, you don't get the job. And I was super devastated at the time, in juxtaposition to when I got the job that I wasn't expecting when I was 15. And they said, but do you know anything about business news? And I was like, I hated business news. I didn't know shit about business news. My boyfriend in high school said he wanted to be a hedge fund manager. I thought he wanted to be in gardening. Like, I knew 0.0 about business news. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna break out into hives. And I was like, abso-fucking-lutely. I love business news. I love it all day, every day.
I read the Wall Street Journal for breakfast. It was like...
And I lied. I totally lied. Yeah, 100%.
Because no one's ever done that to get a job before.
Right,
like,
faked it till I made it. I mean, I totally own it. And then I was thrown on the floor of the Chicago Merc for this network called First Business Network at the time. And I just went to the School of Hard Knocks.
And so then what happened?
And then I figured that money was just a language like anything else. We just don't have a Rosetta Stone for this language growing up. We learn like some BS stuff in school while wearing thongs.
Is this when you started to identify perhaps patterns within your own life financially that just were either unhealthy or destructive, or how did you get there? Because I know your first book was a money book, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Rich Bitch.
Rich Bitch. So how did that come about?
So fast forward about a decade after that, and I was anchoring on CNBC.
Well, I'm curious now what happened in that decade. I didn't realize it was that far. Is there a synopsis? Just give me the synopsis.
We're really going into the whole life story.
Straight.
I like it. Well, so after I was a business reporter, I then went to CNN where they hired me, I thought by mistake. I was there for 4 years in Atlanta. And I anchored.
Atlanta, CNN. Wow, well done.
Yeah, headquarters, baby. And I know. I anchored like the biggest stories of our time. Massive shootings, international news, elections, and then the financial crisis happened, and money was the story everybody was talking about, and everybody became a business reporter again. And so I leaned into that. Also, my entire division got let go at CNN. So at the time, I was like, okay, my career is over. But in hindsight, it was actually the best thing that ever happened.
So you were made redundant along with a lot of other people?
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
And I got a job immediately in business news here. So I moved to New York at the time, and I was anchoring a super early morning show, but the only global show on the network, which was called Worldwide Exchange.
Right.
And yeah, we're covering, world economic news and talking to CEOs and politicians every morning. And
so you're getting the education of a lifetime, aren't you? Like,
at that point, I already knew what was up.
Okay.
Like, I hopefully knew.
But also at the same time, I'm going to assume you're talking to industry leaders and titans and
Totally.
like access that most business people or entrepreneurs would love to have. And you're like, oh, that's just like my 11 a.m.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you, in many ways at the time, consciously or maybe unconsciously use that, like to your advantage to really learn the mechanics of business? Because you then obviously got into business for yourself.
Well, there's always learning you can do, right? I mean, it's a language like anything else. I spoke it, and then I became fluent, and then I spoke it to the world. I never thought I'm like the least likely person to be doing that. But at that point, I really honed, hopefully, my reporting skills and my interviewing skills, where I was really listening to what people were saying instead of just waiting for my turn to talk. And I remember just asking like seemingly dumb questions, because at that point I was so much more comfortable in my own skin. I knew my badge was gonna work, like imposter syndrome went away. And I was just like, I don't understand what this person's saying, and I'm really smart and I know this stuff. And if I don't understand, then other viewers aren't gonna understand either. So I kind of took an unconventional style around my reporting. And then I was like, I'm tired of talking to old rich white dudes about money. I wanna talk to the audience that needs it most, which is my former self, the girl who was so freaked out and scared about anything business related, I want to talk to her, and I want to democratize this content for an audience that I think needs it most.
So at what point did you have the itch, like to either write a book or to run your own show, like to do your entrepreneurial, like had you had the entrepreneurial itch, or had you had the book itch, or?
I was always entrepreneurial within a bigger company. So I was
Okay.
like an intrapreneur. So I
Okay.
started series at CNN, and like at the time CNN blogs started, I started a series called Young People Who Rock, which is a hilarious name, but
right.
it was like an interview series where I interviewed different young people under 30 doing amazing things. It was the first interview ever with Justin Bieber. We were like, wait, who is this guy? Yeah.
Oh, what the? Like...
Yeah, totally. Oh my gosh, that's exactly what he did. And my booker at the time was like, I think you should interview this guy. He's trending on Twitter. Like,
who's
he's
this kid
something
with
to
the
do with
twitch?
Usher.
Yeah.
Totally. He totally flicked his hair. We got all these viewer questions about like, will you date me? And yeah, I remember being at home, like updating the WordPress or whatever on CNN.com myself. You would think like there's all these big fancy things.
Content teams. And
Yeah, but I tried to be nimble and entrepreneurial within
Okay.
a bigger company, and I did the same thing at CNBC. I started series. I flew around. I interviewed governors. I tried to innovate where I could. Sometimes I pushed it. And yeah, I think that at that point I was 27. I still went back to anchor on Bloomberg. So I could talk to sort of like these business leaders, but also the Wendy Williams audience or like the Us Weekly audience. So I tried to just talk about business across the spectrum, from like The Economist to Us Weekly, because money is the biggest story of our time. It touches everything. Every story, I think, goes back to money, whether it's stocks, bonds, spreads, yields, buns, whatever, currency, or how to get your friend to pay you back.
And was this the genesis of the first book, consciously or unconsciously?
Unconsciously at the time, I didn't know that I was building this brand. People were like, how did you do this? It was like this strategy. I'm like, nope, sure wasn't. I just, I thought rich bitch is what I would have wanted.
Yeah.
I didn't know I was disrupting the personal finance space.
So you wrote that book for your younger self?
Totally.
Yeah.
Swore in a finance book for the first time. I know.
Wow.
Super proud of that.
Bomb. Did that go over well?
I thought I was going to be a TV person and check the box and write a book and send it for Christmas or Hanukkah and call it a day. And then it became a thing. It like hit the list right away. It sold out. It was like, I definitely wasn't expecting to
So you didn't
write.
have an agent or anything?
Oh, I had an agent.
Right.
Like I had
Did
a
they
bigger
know
agent.
it was going to move, or it was just
I
like...
mean, you really know, because there's a gazillion and a half books in
Yeah.
the world. And then
Because normally
Rich
most
Bitch-
people, let's be honest, who hit the New York Times bestsellers list, they've got a great PR campaign behind it.
Well, I had that also, for
But-
sure. I had all the things.
Okay.
Yeah, I definitely, like, I went into it
Yeah.
to win it, but I didn't necessarily.
But to be fair, there are many people that go into that with the PR campaign that never make the list.
It's hard.
It's very hard. Yeah.
It's no joke. It's not a side hustle. I actually wrote about this in my second book.
Okay.
Like a confessions of how this actually happened, because a ton of
Okay.
people will ask me like, how do I, get on the list or get on, Dr. Oz or Good Morning America or whatever. And I always go back and I say like, write a good book. Like, hello, Captain Obvious. And also it's not a side hustle. If you really want it to be successful, it's a full-time hustle. And it took me 10 years to get a book deal. I had different iterations. I had 4 different agents and proposals and
Before you
false
published.
starts. Yeah.
Rich Bitch.
Yep.
So Rich Bitch was a 10-year gig.
Yeah.
Wow, kudos.
Yeah, I didn't think it was going to happen for me. There was a book that I sold before that called Making Bank,
Right.
which was like all things to all people, fun, cool finance. It would have been dead on arrival. So thank God that didn't happen. I sold it to a publishing house, and the editor left over the holidays.
Okay.
And so my book deal went away with it. And I was like devastated. But people were going to have feelings about a book called Rich Bitch. Like either you're going to love it or hate it. There was no gray
Was that
area.
around the time when that terminology was being used across a range of different brands, or were you one of the leaders? Because I know we had the Skinny Bitch, I don't know if you got them over here, the Skinny Bitch drinks and...
Skinny Girl.
Skinny Girl wine. There's wine?
Yeah.
Yeah, the Skinny Girl wine. the book Skinny Bitch that came out from the
Yep.
UK authors. Was it around that time, or were you like one of the
Skinny
pioneers?
Bitch had come out before that,
Yeah.
but at the time, you know, I
I
wanted
guess what I'm
more
asking is
controversy.
where'd the name come from? Like, how did you? Because it's a good name. Like,
Thank
it's
you.
like a really.
I'm not good at a lot, like I mentioned, but naming
You keep
is
saying that,
something
but there's a lot of
I'm
things
okay
you're good at.
Naming, you know, I think that the title, you know, it stood out. I wanted to have more controversy around it.
Okay.
I wanted people to like have more of a debate because that's gonna spur
Yeah.
more sales. And I was here for it. At that point, I was like, bring it on. And I didn't really get as much pushback as I was hoping for.
Wow.
Because I really explained that I'm taking back this word and owning it as a badge of honor because I was called a bitch in a derogatory sense in so many
Wow,
ways
strong
along
context. Yeah, good
career. Yeah. And I was like, if you're calling me a bitch and you mean that I'm ambitious and strong and want not only a seat at the table, but a voice, then I'm a bitch and I own that as a badge of honor. And so many young, powerful women do as well. And there were a couple of producers who said, like, I get it, like I get the concept.
Yeah.
There was one anchor, I went on her show and she's like, I see what you're doing, but I don't like the title. And I said, listen, the ends justify the means. If we can get a young woman to pick up a money book who never imagined she picked up a money book otherwise, because that's who I was reaching, somebody who wasn't like perusing the personal finance section of Barnes & Noble, but went in and was like, oh, this sounds fun. This could be like, you know, more of a beach read than anything I would have imagined a personal finance book to be. Then we win. If we can get her to pick it up because of that.
And it's so
And it's
interesting to
worth
see what's happened in the publishing space since. You know, it is interesting because the rich bitch, it's not that I hadn't heard of you. Now on, as we discuss, I'm like, yeah, actually, I did hear about this book. I remember hearing about this book. But what's super interesting now is when we look at titles like Mark Manson, you know, the subtle art of not giving a fuck, you know, international bestseller. There's really been almost like a fourth wall broken when it comes to publishing. And yeah, I guess freedom of speech or freedom of curse.
Yeah, I think it's like maybe over at this point because my last book, so I had Boss Bitch was my second one. And I thought, like you joked about it in the beginning, but Zen Bitch was actually on a short list of things.
You've got to do
Zen
Bitch.
I thought I was gonna like continue this dummy series where I would have like a bitch for everything. Housing bitch, like mortgage bitch, like,
got it.
You know, and this third one I thought was going to be happy bitch at first because it was going to be like or balance bitch or something like that. And then we were like, we're over it. Like we're over the bitch thing. And so because it was so saturated with like a ton of you're a badass and fuck this and shit this. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do something different this time.
At least you were one of the pioneers. So
thanks. Pioneers get arrows.
That's not what I meant. So okay, just kind of flipping back to the news just for a quick second. Being exposed to so much news at that anchor level, did you ever become cynical? You know, because you watch shows like The Loudest Voice. You watch shows like, what was the one with that killer show written by...
Sounds really memorable.
It's amazing. Jeff, what's his name? Like it's 2 seasons. It was the guy who wrote West Wing. Aaron Sorkin wrote it.
Oh, The Newsroom?
The Newsroom.
Yeah.
You know, you watch programs like The Newsroom and like there's other programs coming through now where morning show even. Like, have you seen that? Fucking amazing. Like there seems to be like on the content consumption side, there's content that's being produced that is showing a side of broadcast where the journalists themselves, the newsreaders themselves, like aren't necessarily like aligned with what's going on. So I'm curious to know from you, did you become a little cynical in your time in the news, or was it like you worked in a pretty straight and narrow kind of place?
It's funny, on my new TikTok, I have as my bio is like same as Sloane Sabbath, but a little different. And she was the Olivia Munn character in The Newsroom. Oh. She was the business reporter, who I love.
She's
your heart stopped beating.
Oh my gosh,
yeah, me
she's
too.
Gorgeous.
I agreed, 100%. A girl
I
can
fell in
only
love
dream.
with that character, totally. Yeah, nothing to do with her. Yeah.
But when I was in news, it definitely affected me. I covered the Virginia Tech shootings. At the time, it was the largest massacre in the States. I covered the, Osama bin Laden in the middle of the night. I got woke up. In local news, I covered like triple homicides and floods and fires and crazy
So you've
stuff.
seen a lot.
I've seen a lot.
Yeah.
And
my question is less about that and more about the cynicism of the news industry and the quality of the content that's coming out in terms of, aligned with you and the accuracy with the message that you're sharing. And I'm not trying to blow up anything. And if there's anything that comes up you're uncomfortable with, we can absolutely cut it.
I don't get that uncomfortable.
Okay.
Try harder. I think when I was at CNN, if this is what you're getting at, like, was I at the time disillusioned by the state of what we were covering? I think that we covered like Paris Hilton leaving jail. We covered like Anna Nicole Smith's death.
News.
And I was a little disillusioned because I went in thinking like I want to be Christiane Amanpour and, like I said, cover the first draft of history, and we're doing really important stuff here. And at the time, I remember thinking this is not, the CNN that covered the Gulf War. This is not that. Okay. And I think we were in a transition time of trying to figure out, the balance between infotainment and opinion journalism. Like Anderson was covering Katrina at the time and started crying or giving opinions, and that hadn't happened in news until then. I mean, sleeveless started becoming a thing, which I was there for. It was changing, and when I got to CNBC, I remember looking at the Today Show and seeing like the Kardashians hosting, or like Mario Lopez, getting the extra job, which is great, but also random, and I was like, this is all changing. And what the trajectory used to be was like local news, network news, go be like a White House correspondent, go do the morning show, then do the evening news. And that my agents at the time when I left CNBC were like, you're making the biggest mistake of your career. You're on this trajectory. And I was like, this fucking trajectory is over. Like, it's
ready to get off.
Done. Yeah. Like, it's not that anymore. It's, a career in the media is more like a rope swing or rock climbing than a ladder. I mean, what I was seeing at the time, it's like, you need some subject matter expertise or you're done. Like, you're commoditized. I couldn't sit in front of a camera and tell those aforementioned old rich white dudes what the Dow and the NASDAQ were doing and like think that I was somehow special. They could have plucked me out and put somebody else in and talked about what the Dow was doing. And that I wasn't interested in that. I was interested in having my own voice. And I think that at the time, I had an inkling that this was the way to have longevity within media. Yeah. And I knew it was changing, but I couldn't put my finger on it. I didn't know what I was going to be building, but I knew I had to build something in order to survive.
And so how did you then go on to commercialize? Did you just go straight into the author space and you focused on books, speaking, education? Like, what happened from there? Book comes out, it's a hit. What do you do next?
Yes. So then I think of, the book says births. I've never birthed humans, but I've birthed now 3.5 or 4 babies, and they don't have an epidural for that. And I think that like Rich Bitch was really hard to get out, and Boss Bitch was like, it came out in the cab on the way to the hospital or something. Like I didn't even realize it was happening. Wow. And we continued on with that momentum. And this last book was probably the hardest of all of them to get out. But, I continued on to try to build that brand through different verticals. Online education became more of a thing only recently. Okay. And then I just wanted to create powerful business adjacent, money adjacent content across all mediums. So online, on TV, on print, everywhere.
It's interesting, especially when you're talking about the trajectory at CNN, because now you don't need to be a journalist with a great look to be a reporter. You just need a mobile phone and access to Twitter.
Totally.
Or access. And now you don't even need to be a politician to be a president these days. Like you literally can be a reality TV star as a result of, social media. And so you've seen a shift in obviously the consumption of media, and you've kind of moved with that shift, which is really quite smart. And you did it clearly at the right time.
Well, I remember at CNN, right? Yeah, iReport had launched. I don't know if iReport is still a thing because everybody is iReport. iReport was an initiative where citizen journalists could cover news and send it in, and then they could get on CNN and stuff like that. And I was like, fuck this. You know how much I paid for journalism school at Northwestern? Like, I didn't need all that. That was like the dumbest thing I've ever done. I put some meme out there that was like the dumbest thing I've ever done for money, and me. And I have my like cap and gown.
I think I saw that. Yeah.
I would have told my former self, like, just start working, which is what I did.
Yeah.
I knew I wanted to start working early on and getting that practical experience, but I definitely saw all of that changing citizen journalism on the rise.
Yeah, right.
And, you know, I was an early adopter to Twitter, and I remember getting notes from standards and practices at CNN being like, what is she doing? She's putting out news that's not on the air. Like, tell her to stop. And I remember having like lawyers and stuff like come in while I was anchoring. And then what ended up happening was like Twitter became on the big screen. Like, it went balls to the wall with like the Twitter stuff. But at the time, like, they didn't know what was going on there.
That's so interesting.
But
so
I did.
Something I've heard you reference a couple of times now is your childhood and trauma. At what point during your professional coming out, and I wouldn't want to say professional, entrepreneurial coming out, did you start to realize, wow, I've actually got some stuff that I'm hanging on to here? Because, you know, oftentimes people look at success as the panacea, the success is the medicine, work is the medicine. And so we trudge, and then we go, I'll be fixed once I get to the anchor at CNN, my $1 million, whatever it is, the house. And then they get there and they go, oh shit, like we had said before, fuck, I'm still just as insecure as I was before. At what point did you go, okay, wow, I've done all these stuff, but something still doesn't feel right. I want to perhaps take a different take. I've got to do something different. When was that? When did that come into play?
You know, I thought I would be happy when I got to CNN, when I got to CNBC, when I made a certain amount of money, and I was never happy. It always became another goal, another bar to reach. I never got my brain to the other side. And while I was promoting Boss Bitch, I had a nationally syndicated show that was like a Shark Tank for kids. I had these books. I had seemingly from outward appearances, all the things. And I was miserable. And I had a complete mental, emotional, physical breakdown that stemmed from burnout that I didn't even know it was burnout at the time, and an emergency admittance to the psych ward that made me rethink everything. I was suicidal, I was depressed, I was completely stressed out.
How old were you?
It was a few years ago. I was in my 30s.
Okay.
And it made me rethink everything in my life. And at that moment, I was this, you know, the queen boss bitch preaching badassery to women and how to get their careers together. And at 4:00 in the morning when I was in the emergency room, you know, with a full bottle of Ambien that I was fully intending to take, and my shrink and my assistant canceling everything, I realized the thesis of what my third book ended up being is that self-care is the biggest asset or liability in your career. And when it's off, it can bring you to rock bottom like it did for me. That was my personal rock bottom. And when it's on point, it can bring you more success. But that...
Was there a trigger that kind of, you got to the point where something was just, it was that last little straw that just went ting and everything unraveled inside?
One of my favorite lines in the book, because I've thought a lot about this, of course, in the therapy and the, you know, going to Bali and every, you know, guru and shaman I've ever, you know, seen and tried to like really understand and hack happiness and balance in like not a woo-woo way, but a way that I needed that information, so I needed to understand. But I say that my breakdown wasn't a spontaneous combustion precipitated by a single event, but a lifetime of smoldering embers that finally caught fire and incinerated everything in their path.
I love that.
And I think about that visual a lot because I've really thought a lot about how this
So
happened.
it's a total rebirth, like a total phoenix moment.
I will rise.
Yeah.
I rise.
Yeah.
Here I am.
And so what came out of that? Like, because up until that point, had you ever done like therapy before? Had you done self-development, personal self-care? Like,
no.
Right. So this was new.
Right now.
And so...
And I did out of necessity. I had no other choice.
Okay. And so what did you learn about yourself?
So
What did you
many
find?
things.
Like, what were when you were like looking through the ashes of what was coming out, what did you find as the key things you went, oh shit, I need to do work on that. Oh shit, that. What were the things that you saw, okay, these were contributing factors. These are my wounds. Now I got to do my work.
I didn't realize that PTSD was the diagnosis that people who didn't go to war could have. And that's what I had, and that's what I resonated with. And it made a lot of sense because there were times in my life that I had, it's called hyperarousal in the DSM, but not the sexy kind. PTSD. Like times of, you know, like hyperactivity and hiding in work, and then times of, you know, depression and many rounds in the ring with darkness. And I could never explain it. And it wasn't that I was chronically depressed, but I had long periods of depression. And when I had the PTSD diagnosis, it made a lot more sense. I could look my problems in the eye, and I didn't actually look at it as a problem. I looked at it as one of my biggest superpowers because it made me who I am. I don't wish I was different. I don't wish I didn't have it. You know, I wouldn't have this platform that I have right now had I been different, had I been more balanced. And so I looked at it as the superpower, and I realized though that there is no external solution to an internal problem. And that's what I was looking for.
Wow.
Those don't exist.
So when you got that diagnosis, what was your first response? Oh, fuck, no, I don't have PTSD. Like,
no, it resonated with me a lot. I ended up getting out of the hospital and needing to go to an outpatient program. Yeah. So I became valedictorian of the psych ward. I mean, I used those skills. It was crazy.
You're amazing.
I had my little notebooks, all my worksheets and books and stuff like that. And I took dialectical behavioral therapy in an outpatient program that really changed my life. And it taught me skills, because all of this stuff is skills-based. Yeah. And that's how my brain works. I'm like, give me skills, give me steps, like technique, exactly. Tactic. And when I learned emotional regulation and interpersonal effectiveness and all these things, I was like, oh my gosh, we should have learned this stuff in school. Like, yes, I've been saying for years, we should have learned a budget and how to do our taxes and business plan. Like, if I'm in charge of the world, that's what we're teaching kids. But also, like, these skills are probably going to affect your career more than anything else. Pausing before an email, like all of these things that you can break down in steps, mindfulness, like, that made me a different person in business, a different person in my personal life.
Wow, that's incredible.
Changed everything.
I can relate because I remember when I got my PTSD diagnosis, I was in denial because I had done, like, I thought like a fuck ton of work. You know, I got to where I had it, and it was during my separation with my wife. We're just doing some counseling just to make this, keep the things moving in the right direction because we had a very, very good separation. And yeah, after 4 sessions with this therapist, she's like, I'm just letting you know you've been living with undiagnosed PTSD, and I'm going to assume based on your history for at least 20 years. And I remember the first response was I was like, and in my head I'm like, who the fuck do you think you are? Like, I know myself better than anyone.
Interesting.
Like, it was a total moment of ego, but I think it was context based because it was, you know, it was quite a emotional period of time. But I left that session and I got curious. I was like, started looking at PTSD and the symptoms, like, oh fuck.
Wow.
Oh, wow. Oh, shit. And then I started talking to people, like randomly, like bumping into people and like, oh, yeah, I've got PTSD, I've been treated. I was like, tell me about it. And they'd tell me about the story. I was like, shit, I do that. Like, and then it was revolutionary because I was like, wow, now I know what I can work on. Like, it gave me a step. I was like, okay, I've got something I can put my foot on now to leverage up. And again, I'm very much like you. It's like, I saw it as a superpower, but I just didn't have a name for it. And now I'm like, oh my God, it's such a incredible gift. So I really resonate with your story.
Thank you for
I really get it.
I think we're more than labels. I think that, you know, there's this whole movement, like, we're more than labels, 100%. But also when you name it, it takes away some of its power.
It does. And I think that's important. I think it's important we don't get stuck on labels, but we use them as like as a flashlight. To go, let's look at this. Like, yeah.
It's been so helpful for me.
And so you've obviously continued to do the self-development work, the self-care work. Like when you treated your PTSD, like what were some of the things you did? You did what was it? It was
Dialectical behavioral
therapy. What's that? I've actually, like, that's
it's awesome. Now Lady Gaga's talking about it. I just saw her out in the media, which she's actually doing an amazing job talking about how that's
This is a treatment for PTSD?
It's a treatment, I think, for everyone. There's cognitive behavioral therapy. There's dialectical behavioral therapy. And dialectics mean that two things can be true at the same time. So you can love what you do and hate your job. There's like no necessarily absolute. Wow. And so holding those two things.
So it's a balancing therapy.
Yeah.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so it gives you the skills.
Have you tried EDMR? Did you try at any point
Yeah.
EDMR? Okay.
Yes, I've been going through active like trauma therapy and EMDR.
Would you like to know the thing that like nailed my PTSD? Like literally got rid of all the symptoms?
Tell me everything. Yes.
Because I had like symptomatic, I'd have a trigger. It would normally be something emotional, and then
Yeah.
I'd go boom, and I'd go into fight or flight, and sometimes I'd be plus 100 heartbeat for like 5, 6 days, 7 days straight, and like I'm functioning, but my body is like, oh, we're at war.
Yeah.
And even as I was doing the EDMR, it was starting to calm down, but I did psychedelic and MDMA therapy. Gone.
Wow. It's on my list.
We'll
talk more about this.
I haven't had a PTSD attack in, it's got to be like 9 months now. Yeah.
Wow. You did it once?
No, I did 3 sessions.
Okay.
Very educated. Like I didn't
Sure.
just jump on the dark neck and, let's get some LSD and let's
Right.
party at home.
Yeah.
Like I did the process. I studied Fadiman. I studied the work that Ferris had done, and he put me on, just by studying Fadiman's work, the Psychedelic Explorer's Guide, he put me onto a whole bunch. And I did literally probably almost 12 months of research, like dedicated, obsessive, minutia research before I was like, yep, okay, like I want to give this a shot. And it was like life-changing. And I'm sure you've probably looked at the statistics of the MDMA talk therapy versus just traditional talk therapy. It's phenomenal. And I can say hand on heart, yeah, it absolutely works.
Wow.
Yeah. Are you open to that kind of thing?
Yeah, it's on my list. I have different places that I've already been talking
Well, you
with.
mentioned shaman before. Like, has plant medicine been a part of your journey at this point, or?
It hasn't as much.
Okay.
Ayahuasca's on the list, all the things. Like, I'm open to trying everything.
Nice. If you're called, I should say, yeah.
Totally. Yeah, it's not for everybody. I'm open to it.
Yeah.
I've tried a ton of different things, and I wanted something that felt more like a guidebook or a manual to like figure this out. And that didn't exist. And so, I went to Bali, I went to Miraval, and did equine therapy, and which actually really helped me. You did it too?
Well,
Oh my God, we're just starting the podcast, I feel like.
Oh, I've got a whole story there. Yeah. Massive story.
Tell me, can I take the reins and now conduct this interview?
The short version is, have you heard a horseman called Pat Pirelli?
No.
It's like he's one of the top horse whisperers.
Have you heard Wyatt Webb?
No. Hang on, he's the original.
Yeah.
Yes,
he's like the cowboy OG.
Oh, is that Monty? I can't remember. But short version, I dated Pat Pirelli's niece. He's like one of the top horse whisperers on the planet. Dated his niece for like just 4 years, and as a natural consequence, I was introduced to horsemanship, which in essence is equine therapy, because you're working with the energy of the animal, and you can't influence the animal. You're not influencing the animal through behavior, you're influencing it through energy. So you're essentially learning how to get a horse to do everything you want by not touching it and just directing it with your energy. And it's just like, wow. And then I did, I guess you could say, I did the same with dogs, because I learned how to train horses. I had been a dog trainer. I was more interested in the dog psychology side. And that's why, when I kind of moved into the human space, I was like, oh, wow, humans are kind of like just sophisticated dogs and horses.
Some of them.
Well, in reality, when you look at the neurology, human beings, especially kids, kids are just a puppy with a neocortex. And when you understand that developmental side, it's a beautiful thing to be a part of, to be able to nurture. Yeah. Because you never, again, how effective is it to yell at your dog when it does something wrong? Like, how effective is it to lock a dog in a room when it does something? It's not. You've got to learn how to work with the dog, and it's the same with humans, with people.
Totally.
Yeah.
And horses don't have shame. They're not like, oh man, I have a fat ass today. They're
not
like
ego.
shaming
They're
themselves.
in the moment. They're in the moment. Dogs, they're in the moment.
They're not holding a grudge against some other horse who whacked him with his tail. Right, that's right.
Dude, piss on what? I don't remember pissing on your carpet.
So many great lessons. Everything I learned about boundaries and intentions, I learned from a horse.
I'm really enjoying this conversation.
I'm so glad.
Yeah, very much.
So tell me what you learned.
About you?
Oh, no.
Is this a test?
No.
That was quick.
Recap. No, about the horses. I did this whole thing.
The equine side?
Yeah.
Well, to me, it was really understanding, because when you work with dogs energetically, when you work with horses energetically, it's a leadership exercise. It's not an exercise in technique. It's not an exercise in sit, do this. It's not an exercise in domination. It's an exercise in collaboration, but it's an energetic collaboration. Like, it's learning how to work with an animal so that it trusts you, and the animal knows, whether it's a dog or the horse, that what you're doing is for the best interest of the animal, not because you're trying to dominate or control. Because if you try and dominate or control anything, what does it do?
Yeah.
It rebels.
Yeah.
If you try and dominate or control a child, you may have that opportunity for the first 13 years of that young human's life because it's of size and intellectual power and ability to manipulate. But once they reach a stature where they can think for themselves and they've got stature, they'll rebel because they don't trust that you've been making decisions in their best interest. And so I apply the same technology with my son. I've got a beautiful 6-year-old son who I have 60% of the time. Like when I work with him, I don't lie to him. Like we never lie. I don't manipulate. I don't dominate. I don't use aggression. I never use physical strength as a form of discipline. We talk. And so as a result, like I had this conversation with a mother yesterday. She was telling me how it's really difficult for her to get her daughter to get in the car to go to school. And so she often ends up having to pick her up and put her in the car, and there's tears and everything else. And I said, oh, okay. She says, what do you do? I said, well, I'm late for school pretty much every day for that reason. She goes, well, what do you do? I said, well, I just keep talking to my son and we have a dialogue about why he doesn't want to go, and we discuss why he has to. And we have a real conversation till we get to the point where he agrees we should probably get in the car together. And so as a result, he will get in the car, no tears, no screaming. We might be 10 minutes late for school. But what's happened over the last 6 years, it's now got to the point where he understands we've got to go to school and we don't have to argue about it because we can have a conversation. I don't have to control him. I don't have to dominate him. I don't have to use aggression or threat or manipulation. We use conversation. And it's the same with the dog because, I think kids often inherently learn not to trust people because they feel the intent of their parent. They can feel the intent of their parents like, look, I just need to get this fucking done right now. Like I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing this for me. Or the parent's yelling at the child and it's like, it's got nothing to do with you. The child's upset. Yes, it didn't get a toy, but to that child, that's the equivalent of you fucking getting your Louis Vuitton handbag set on fire. Just be there for the child. Okay, don't make it about you because you feel bad because your friends are looking because your child is screaming. You've got a little human right now that is actually feeling really unsafe. Just be there for that little human. Make them feel safe. Fuck everyone else. It's not about you. It's not about them. It's about the child. And so when you understand that, and I did that with horses. I did that with dogs. And so for me, when I learned that with humans, when you bring it all together, the best thing I learned is leadership is about trust. Like if you can't get a dog to trust you, a horse to trust you, a child to trust you, or a team member or your partner to trust you, you'll never be able to lead at a high level in an authentic way. So yeah, that was my biggest lesson.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it's so incumbent on the parents because, again, we don't learn
so much responsibility. We can't point it out, it's the child's fault. Like Cesar Millan, do you follow Cesar Millan?
I don't, but...
He's hilarious because he goes, I don't train dogs. He goes, I rehabilitate dogs and I train humans. And because I do a lot of work with parents.
Okay.
Because I am a parent. And our most popular content is parenting, but 90% of my clients are business owners with kids. And so as a result, a lot of my work that I do with clients is helping them learn how to become better parents in the process of running their business at the same time. Because it's a tough juggle. It's hard.
It is.
Yeah.
It's so interesting because when I turned 30, like my biological clock was crazy. I wanted to steal babies from the street. I was just ravenous. I was like, I'm not going to be that girl. But biology really takes over. And I just look back and at the time I was like, why am I not, having kids with my boyfriend at the time? I was so hungry to also start a family and fix what had happened to me and all of that stuff. Yeah. But I had to parent myself.
Yes. Yeah.
I was like,
when did you realize that? When did you realize there was a wounded little girl in there that needed a parent, like a strong parent, and you had to be that parent?
Yeah, it was only in the last few years where I needed to teach myself all of the things that a parent would have. I've gone through and done reparenting and memory clearing exercises and all sorts of stuff where I'm really reframing what had happened to me and then also understanding that you're only responsible for 50% of a relationship and you clean up your side of the street. I started going to meetings a lot. Adult Children of Alcoholics, it has been really helpful for me. And there's a lot that I felt like I was alone with, and I'm really not. And all of the, people that are at meetings, through a lot of different kinds of dysfunctions have the same patterns. Yeah. And so I used to think, I don't want to go to group therapy or I don't want to go to group workout classes. I'm not a group workout class kind of girl, but there's something really nice about having that community as well. And I think cleaning up your side of the street.
Yeah. And staying in your learning. And that was one for me, learning how to stay in my own lane, And so some of your self-care routines, you've mentioned a couple now already. Are there any other things that you do just to make sure that you are number one and you get taken care of?
So I always feel the difference. In an ideal world, I'll wake up and not touch my phone for about an hour, not go into other people's agendas, really focus on what my intention is. I can feel the difference when I do a gratitude journal and when I don't. And that's why I came out with a journal, because it really changed my life and my perspective throughout the day. And then you find yourself looking for those things throughout the day. So we've seen, of course, dopamine is not just from pleasure, sex, shopping, drugs, whatever, but searching for the pleasure, which is why we're so addicted to TikTok and other things. And so I find myself searching more for the gratitude, which is a great cycle to get into. And then at night, the same thing of, I used to not be able to sleep and was on this Ambien Adderall cocktail. And I was like, why can't I sleep? Maybe it's because I'm shining a bright light into my eyeball from like 3 inches away. And, listen, I don't do that every day. I definitely have more good days than bad days, so I consider that a win. Yeah. But I was on the press tour for this last book and on this show in LA, and they were asking all the guests, like, what do you do for your morning routine? Same type of thing. I'm like, oh, I should really talk about the book and push that. And I'm a terrible liar. I just can't keep up with lies at all. So I just don't do it. I just say it. The only way I know how to tell a story is to tell it honestly. And so they asked the other guests, and the first guy is like, yeah, I write down what I'm manifesting, the top 5 things. I drink lemon water and whatever. And the anchor was actually really smart. She was like, well, what are those 5 things? He's like, just look at it every day. I'm like, bullshit, dude. Okay. The next person was like, I drink lemon water. I run 5 miles. I'm like, they get to me and I said, I took my eyelashes off from the night before. I scrolled on Instagram to find my ex-boyfriend's page. I ended up on his new girlfriend's, sister's, cousin's, dog's page. I drank a venti red eye and I tried to make something out of my life, and there was no lemons left in LA, so I couldn't drink any lemon water. And I was
gold.
That's real.
That's beautiful.
I thought, my book was supposed to come out in March because in my mind, my first book came out in March, my second book came out 2 Marches later, and my third book was supposed to come out 2 Marches after that. And right as we were going to print, I felt like I was on the verge of relapse again. I felt like I was an imposter, that imposter syndrome that hadn't been around for years was like, how are you going to talk about balance? How are you going to talk about avoiding burnout? You're a hot mess. And I would think, I'll get back to this balance stuff after the book. I know what a book tour is like. I'll get back to that stuff after the chaos. So I pushed the book out 6 months actually, which is something my former self would have never done. Wow. I went off the grid. I literally read my own book. And that's not a marketing spin thing at all. I was like, damn, who wrote this? This is really good. I did all the exercises and I wrote an epilogue at the end that talked about that. And I said, balance and chaos have to coexist. They must. You can't have balance or chaos. It has to be balance and chaos. It's always chaos is a game of whack-a-mole. When one thing happens, if it's not the book tour, it's some other launch, it's always going to be something. Yeah. You have to incorporate this stuff daily. I had a lifetime of terrible habits. I was mad at myself because I was like, I got woke. I'm good. I found balance. We're good. Yeah. No, ma'am. I look at balance more as a verb than a noun. And I think we often use it as a noun. We found balance. It's right there under the couch. We're done. No, I had a lifetime of bad habits, and only a lifetime of good habits is enough to counteract that. Yeah, right. And so I realized that if I have more good days than bad days, I'm winning. And it's not about it's not about having balance all the time, but having the skills to regain your balance when you inevitably will lose it, because you will.
So last question, and I was thinking about this really hard.
No, I don't want it to end.
I don't want to. Well, we can keep going if you want. I'm just respecting you've got a meeting at 11. But I do. There is one question I want to ask you, because obviously, with the career that you've had, you've kind of reached the great heights that many young women and many young men would probably want to and still want to achieve when it comes to, not just the anchor position, but also the brand. Because I think what's happening now is there's probably a whole raft or a new wave or a new generation of people that once upon a time may have wanted to be a broadcaster and now they want to be an influencer. Because essentially when we look at what broadcasters are, when you look what anchors are, they're just professional influencers that have been paid by a network to share content that they distribute. And so when I look at what you've done, I'm like, wow, you really were one of the early pioneers in the influencer space. and I'm going to assume you learned all sorts of stuff when it came to privacy, when it came to taking risks, when it came to timing, when it came to, just knowing what to say, when to say it. When you look at everything from a branding perspective, from a personality perspective, if you were to give your younger self, who perhaps is growing up in this age, is like, well, maybe I don't want to become a broadcaster, but I want to share a message. I want to share, something with the world that's meaningful. What advice would you give perhaps that 15-year-old version of yourself who's like, oh my God, I can do this. I can do what I want. What would you say to them?
I've had a lot of self-deprecating comments through our interview about that I'm not good at anything.
Yeah.
And I'm not mean to myself these days, but I'll explain that I mean that I become an expert in something new every single day.
Yeah, okay.
I feel like I am constantly learning. I feel like nobody's an expert in anything if they feel like they say they are, like run the other way, because nobody's had anything figured out yet. And so that's what I tell my former self, like, be okay with the fact that you're constantly going to be learning and iterating through your career. And also, don't be a mean girl to yourself. I think we all have a mean girl or a mean guy inside our head. And I used to have a terrible audio tape that played in my head of something. If I lost a deal or something happened at work, I would just rail on myself. You suck. You're the worst. You're going to die alone. You're going to be broken homeless and live in the gutter. But if your best friend or your sister or whatever came to you and said, I messed up at work, are you gonna say, you suck, you're the worst, you're gonna die alone, be broken homeless, and live in the gutter, and die with cats? No, you're gonna be like, baby, it's okay, you're the best, let me give you a hug. I didn't do that to myself. I think a lot of us don't do that to ourselves. And I literally put a ring on it.
I saw that story.
I was looking.
So that was a declaration of self-love?
It was.
Yeah, nice.
And it is. And I look at it all the time, and maybe one day I'll have a ring on this hand, I don't know, but I'll always keep the one in this hand, because the most important relationship is the one you have with yourself.
The most important commitment is the one you make for yourself.
Literally till death do you part. No one else. Ain't no one else.
Look, I want to rip these out before we go. Do you mind?
Yay, of course.
Okay, so, oh my God, like I said, you've written a library. So we've got Rich Bitch. This is the first book. So
that just came out, actually.
Oh, so it's been revised?
Yeah, so 4 years later, this was the second edition.
So who should read Rich Bitch?
Anyone who wants to be a rich bitch.
Anyone?
Yeah, it's basic personal finance stuff.
Well, then we've got, what was the next book?
Yeah, Boss Bitch, the
Boss
yellow
Bitch.
one.
Who needs to read Boss Bitch?
Where
Any
I'm
bitch?
sitting on the photographer was like, just sit on the desk for one of them, we won't use it. I'm like, okay. So they did. This is actually broken out into 3 sections. So it's becoming the boss in different aspects of your life.
Okay.
And we go through different stages, like we've been talking about throughout the course of this interview. So what it's like to be a boss of you and your family, be a boss within a bigger company, and then starting your own business. I mean, who knows? I could go work for someone else. I could become the boss if someone wants to knock me up of my family and take time off or whatever, and all these different permutations in between. So it's kind of choose your own adventure.
I love it, the 12-step plan.
Yeah, they're all 12-step plans.
Oh,
yeah.
I love the 12 steps.
Yeah, the first step
I'm
is
such a
admitting you
fan.
have a problem.
Okay, so after Boss Bitch, then came
then Becoming Superwoman.
Becoming Superwoman, and you've got obviously the Becoming Superwoman journal as well.
Yeah.
And this is a part of the book, learning how to journal.
Yeah, it's a companion. It talks about the steps that I take to figure out balance through the day. I have a Weight Watchers type system that I've come up with. That's give yourself 10 points, because balance looks different at different times.
Yeah.
And it could look up different every day. And when I was in my book tour, for instance, I gave myself 10 points. The only requirement is you give at least 1 point to emotional wellness. Otherwise, it will require all 10 points.
Right.
And so I gave myself a couple of emotional wellness points, and the rest were career points. I wasn't dating. I was a terrible friend, but I forgave myself for what I wasn't focused on then. And I was just very clear that that's what I was
And so where
doing.
can we get our hands on these incredible pieces of literature?
Everywhere books are sold.
Okay. What's your
on
website?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, whatever. NicoleLapin.com.
Okay. You're on obviously all the social handles?
All the social handles. New on TikTok.
Fantastic.
Pretty
so you
stoked
gave
about
me,
it.
which one did you give me? Becoming Superwoman?
Yes.
So we might do a giveaway. So for the person who
That'd
does
be great.
well, let's ask a question. What would be a question that you would ask of a young Superwoman?
Yeah, what's your superpower?
Oof, what's your superpower? Best superpower gets the book.
Well, because it's Superwoman, so it's like killing the idea of Superwoman, the character who tries to be it all and do it all and be all things to all people because she's nothing to herself. And then putting your oxygen mask on first before helping others. So being a super space woman, it's not just for my legs on the cover. It's like legit. It's the reason.
You do. Oh, because when you came in, I was like, where's the cape? Like, I thought you were a superhero.
I have so many cape dresses.
Best, most unique superpower, and we'll send that book out to you. Nicole, I feel this is like the first of many conversations to come. I really enjoyed this conversation.
So did I.
Yeah.
What's funny is we didn't get to this part of my life story, but I was thinking about it as you were holding the books because you're like, where can I get these lovely pieces of literature? And I wanted to be a writer when I was really young. I wanted to be a poet.
Wow.
And so I started actually as like wanting to be an English major and sitting under a tree and writing all sorts of poetry. And I became a writer, just not the kind I expected.
Wow.
And so I think when a lot of entrepreneurial like personalities say, go out and do what you love, like YOLO, FOMO, burn your corporate bra, if not now, when? Like I didn't have the luxury to go be a poet. I needed to pay the bills. And so I figured out the shaded part of the Venn diagram that I had. That's the truth. Like I didn't want to talk about business at all, but I had that opportunity and I looked at the things that I really like to do and I found the shaded part of that Venn diagram.
That's so cool.
So ultimately I became a writer, just kind of a sellout writer, not winning any awards, but getting the job done.
And you've now got a new fan. Thank you so much for coming in.
Likewise.
This episode was brought to you by Nail It and Scale It, the world's leading fast growth program for business. There you have it, guys. Thanks for tuning in to Unstoppable with me, your host, Kerwin Ray. And please do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel where you get to see all of these interviews in the flesh. Share this podcast with your friends and drop me a review on iTunes. I would love to hear what you guys think and also let you know your comments help make sure that we keep producing killer content just like this. And if you'd like to stay up to date with all of my movements, upcoming podcasts, events, and much more, please jump onto the website kerwinray.com and also check us out on all social media on the handle @KerwinRay. Thanks for joining us.